Firstly speaking, in terms of the proofs for this, there are many scholars, for example Sayyid al-Khoi or Ayatul al-Muntadhiri or other such like scholars, who would say that if we are genuinely critical, the religious arguments put forward do not genuinely point to our understanding of taqlid. You look at the verse, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people. فَاسْأَلُوا. The verse is saying ask people. The way you ask a question can take many different forms. So the one type of asking where you ask one person and one person only, and you exclude everybody else's opinion, isn't very clearly indicated by that verse. The verse says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ. Ask the people of remembrance. So it would be an imposition upon that verse. We would be taking that verse and trying to fit it into our own theory if we genuinely point to that as a proof of taqlid. And there are many such examples. The Quran says that there should be people who gain an in-depth insight into faith. That's all well and good. Where does Allah say that? What that means is there should be some people who should be followed and no one else. The verse in no way suggests that, neither directly or indirectly. The same way the narration says, فَعَلَى الْأَوَامَ أَنْ يُقَلِّدُهُ, that it is on the general people, the masses, to follow such a person. This is a word which is a linguistic word. To follow an individual can take many different meanings. It's a normal, everyday use of language. So if we want to fast track, number of 100 years down the line, 1,000 years down the line, to what we now understand of taqlid, that's not fair upon the Imam. The Imam may not have, when saying do taqlid in that sense, have meant our understanding of taqlid. There's been a 1,000-year gap between what over the last 100 or so years has become the new conventional understanding of taqlid and what was used as a normal Arabic expression. So again, it would be superimposing. Although the word to do taqlid is used, in what way is that being meant by the Imam? It would be unfair for us to go and transport our understanding of taqlid upon that one word. And there are many other examples of narrations that are put forward. That, for example, the angels cursed the person who gives a fatwa without knowledge or guidance. The narration says that the angels are there cursing people. This is the madmoon of the narration, the gist of it, who give rules without knowledge or guidance. In what way does that say that you have to follow one person who has guidance and has knowledge and nobody else? No, the hadith is criticizing one type of person. We should keep it within its own parameters. We shouldn't take it out of its natural parameters and put it into our discussion and bring it forward as a proof. This would be an unfair and unjust treatment of these religious texts. So for this reason, many scholars like Sayyid al-Khoi say that there isn't genuine support in these religious arguments. At best, what we can say, the aql would give us good reason to believe this. But we can't say that these verses are directly pointing to our common modern day understanding of taqlid. So this is important. When we have all these verses, yes, they are pointing towards going towards experts. But what type of expertise and how we should deal with these experts isn't directly gleaned from these types of narrations and verses that we have put forward. So in that sense, this is a problem encountered by many justifications. Yes, there may be good reason, intellectual reason to believe this, but let's keep that in the domain of the intellect. Let's not bring our intellectual justifications and try to superimpose that upon religious text to get justifications and support from that. That is unfair. Let Allah say what He wants to say. Let the Imam get across what he wants to get across without us making use of what they're saying and essentially misrepresenting these verses and misrepresenting these narrations. Now moving forward, this is one problem which is worth keeping in mind. Another problem is that the theory that you have to follow an expert is an argument which there is little doubt in. But the idea you have to follow one person and one person alone, if we think about it, we can run into problems. For example, if you go to a doctor and he is the top cardiologist and he has the highest consultancy fees and has the longest waiting list, and he gives us a particular opinion. He says that I think that your daughter has blindness for this, or whatever, you have a heart problem, and I would prescribe to you X, Y, and Z. We would be obviously right-minded to listen to what he has to say. But if we went to another specialist in this area who looked at the person's prescription and said, wait a minute, no, there are problems. This medicine, there's a recent study that says, actually, this causes cancer. This medicine isn't good for a person like you because you're taking another type of medication. And they give us really good, cogent and convincing reasons why this actual top-ranking cardiologist has said something which doesn't work. No one in their right mind would discount that second opinion and say, no, I'm just following the expert, I'm not interested in what you have to say. If another leading thinker came forward with very good reasons, we would be foolish not to say, okay, wait a minute, let me at least think about what you've said, maybe I can cross-reference this and speak to the first cardiologist and ask him, what is your opinion? I have a second opinion which has taken issue with what you've said. At a bare minimum, we would do that. We would keep in mind what a second person would say if they can put forward genuine and convincing grounds. So this very blinkered approach of I'm going to one expert and I have no interest in listening to any other knowledgeable people, we wouldn't live according to that in our daily lives when our life was on the line, or if this was financial investments, if we went to a top broker, but then there was another brokerage that had a very good insight into a particular instrument, we would say, wait a minute, no, I'm going to take on board a number of points of view. So from this vantage point, the idea of following one person who is, and one person alone, we wouldn't, if we think about it carefully, find that entirely persuasive and convincing. In a religious sense, what's going on? What we need to keep in mind is that we are after the rule itself. We are after the Hukm. We want to know, how do I pray? We're not so interested in the person who tells us how to pray. Whether it's X, Y, or Z, that doesn't make a difference, because we want to pray so we can please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in that sense, why should we be limited by a particular person? If the person is a ma'soom, infallible person, then it's the person who himself is the lawmaker. If it is the Prophet, whatever the Prophet says goes. Even if we think there's someone who knows more than the Prophet, we would say, Allah didn't make you the Prophet, Allah made Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam the Prophet. So with that particular class of people, the Prophet and his family who have that distinction of being infallible, we would follow what they have to say. But beneath that class, when there are scholars who are hard-working, diligent people, we're more interested in the law that they are pointing us towards. It's not about them in particular. So from this point of view, it doesn't really matter who that one individual is. It's all about the law. So if there's a second scholar who can tell us something about the law, which adds or criticizes what another person says, why on earth would we not follow the other person's point of view? Because ultimately we want to get close to the law itself, not a fallible lawmaker. So from this point of view, it's not a requirement to follow one particular person, because we want to follow the law, not the person who's the legal expert and the legal researcher. We want the law itself. So from this point of view, because the madar, the actual whole focus point is the law, it's not so important who the legal researcher is who actually explains us. Whether X, Y, or Z says it, as long as we get to the law, it doesn't matter. To add to this, another distinction is that when we speak of the most knowledgeable person, there's a difference which is not often pointed out. There's a difference between who is someone who's generally an expert. You have someone who's a lawyer. He's generally very good at the law. So he knows a bit about disputes, he knows a bit about contract, he knows something about intellectual property, he knows something about real estate, he knows about the law, he's a good person. So this is someone who he's the a'lam but with ijmal, he generally has knowledge. Then there is that genius who is an expert in every single field, in commercial transactions, in corporate transactions, in financial transactions, in dispute-related matters, in intellectual property, in IT, every field, he knows everything. He is an encyclopedia himself. If you have someone who's genuinely an encyclopedia, who knows the tafasil of things, then you are well placed to follow that encyclopedia, because you know he knows everything. It's a one-stop legal shop. But if you have someone who, generally speaking, knows a lot about the law, then we can't treat them like an encyclopedia. If we have the Holy Prophet, then he is an encyclopedia. We can follow him in every single area, whether it is a family issue, whether it's a punishment, whether it is to do with death, whatever the case is in our estate. We follow the Prophet because he's an encyclopedia, he knows everything. If you have a general scholar, we can't treat him in a way that he isn't. He has limitations. He has a general collective knowledge, but not a detailed and extensive understanding. So we need to realize that there are different types of people who have a'lamiyya. There is one who has it in a general sense, and then there is one who has the tafasil. If we have someone who has the absolute detail of every single discipline, and this is genuinely the case and demonstrable, then we can follow the one who is a'lam at-tafsili. But we would be hard pressed to find a scholar of that ilk in today's day and age, because it would break many human and physical boundaries and limitations. You will not find scholars of that making, because they do not have that ability to know everything. They have a photographic and every other type of memory. You need to know everything. This is a special type of divine bestowal to have tafasil, knowledge of everything. They have a very elaborate, intricate knowledge of everything. So when we talk of someone who is an expert, we need to say, what is his expertise? Is it something in a collective form, or is it someone who has a detailed and elaborate understanding of everything? If it's just a collective one, we shouldn't follow them in every respect, because you may have someone who's done a PhD in one area. He's invested 3 years of his life. He knows that better than one person who studied that as a marja, but did not invest his whole career in that one issue. So we are following the real a'lam of that particular matter when we go to the PhD candidate who knows this very well, compared to a general scholar who may have spent 3 months bottoming out this issue. So you may have someone who's an a'lam in one matter. He knows this area inside out, but in other areas he doesn't. So we can, because we're looking for the law itself, we can go to a person who's an expert on a particular point. Why do we have to go to one particular expert? So again, these are some of the issues that we will encounter if we try to reason through this understanding. The final point which I would like to wrap up this segment of the discussion is that yes, the books talk about if you don't know, follow an expert. But what the books say and what the theory points to is different to what the practice is. Unfortunately, there are good grounds to believe that what taqlid has become nowadays is a very prejudiced way of being. I follow a particular scholar and he's an expert and he is the best, and the rest are nothing to shout about. My scholar is the best and there's nobody else who has any credibility whatsoever. This type of ta'assub and this type of prejudice is not what is intended by following an expert. But unfortunately this is the case. You're classified, who do you follow? And if you follow someone who's not in my good books, then you have no value. This type of extremism isn't what is intended by Allah wanting us to achieve what the law is. So we need to be also in touch and in tune with what is happening, in the minds of the public. This is what is happening in many different places in the world. That there is this fanaticism that, you follow this scholar may have said one particular issue, this is his historical opinion, and that's it, I'm going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I have nothing to do with this person, he has nothing to offer, there is nothing to benefit from this. My scholar, is an endless ocean and you don't even have a single drop. This type of fanaticism is not intended by this system, and it is very detrimental. And it is not healthy towards the progress of any right-minded individual. So we need to be very fair in this to say that this is something that we have to move beyond. This is not intended by the system itself, and we need to move beyond it. So as we wrap up this discussion, what we can move towards is a system based upon su'al. A system where we inquire. If we do not know knowledge for ourselves, we inquire from experts. We inquire from experts. We ask them. If we do not know ourselves, we approach them, we say, what is the actual ruling here? What is the right way to go about this? What is appropriate? So we employ the methodology of as-su'al, of using questions. This is what happened at the time of the Prophet. He was around, but noble companions would be asked. Imam Ali would be around, but notable individuals would be approached. This is always how the Muslims they carried and conducted themselves, and this is a very sensible way to move forward. So we should ask when we don't know, but that doesn't mean we only have to ask one person and not ask anybody else. So in this way, this approach of asking eliminates two problems. The first problem it eliminates is the idea of turning someone into what he's not, turning him into this infallible legal superman. Every issue he talks about is absolutely the final word on that topic. This type of elevating a noble intellectual to something which is superhuman is unhealthy. That a scholar says in a particular field which is not his expertise, don't do this, we take that as God's word. This kind of gospel-like approach to doing things is very unhealthy, and it limits our progress. So if we just inquire from scholars, this type of hyperbole, this type of overly enlarging the expertise of a person will be reduced, because we ask him a particular issue. If that's your expertise, we follow you. If we don't, then we gladly move on and respect you. We'll ask an expert in sport what his opinion on sport is. We'll ask an expert in performing arts what his opinion is. We'll ask an expert in financial dealings, because this is their expertise. This is their bread and butter. We don't need to go to one person who's good in one area, but his tentacles do not extend that far, that he knows all about derivative transactions and swaps and options and put options. He may have no knowledge of even what these words mean. You translate that into Arabic, who am I? If he doesn't even know, what is a stop, you say wuquf to him. How does he know what that means in a financial market? How that, currency markets trade trillions and trillions of dollars a day. He may not know any idea of how currency markets works. So why would we go and take him as an expert? We certainly wouldn't. If we ask a person according to their expertise, this would be a much more healthy and reasonable way to move forward. The second problem eliminated by the idea of asking is that if someone who we don't follow gives us a very good insight, we would take from them. Because we're concerned with the daleel, we're concerned with the proof. We're not so concerned with the person. So I may take X, I have confidence that they know the law very well, they know it inside out from my point of view. But if there is Y who says something very interesting, why should I not take from them? So this approach of su'al, as opposed to taqlid in the conventional mainstream understanding, all of those problems, they are averted and gotten out of. Because if there's a Y who has a good insight into an issue, we're comfortable following him because they've added value to our understanding. We don't need to be so possessive of following one particular person. So in summary, what we have done is try to give good grounds for believing that there are and there is a legitimate space in the public domain to discuss taqlid, that this shouldn't be kept for the few. In fact, it is good for the majority of the religious population to understand this very well. We have tried to be sympathetic with the conventional understanding of what taqlid means, and also be fair to that approach and put forward their proofs. At the same time, we've tried to be historically true, and we've looked at some of the linguistic meanings of this term. We've also then tried to be quite fair-minded, and as any intellectually minded person, they have their own revisionist impulse. We've looked at the limitations of the theory, and finally we've tried to put forward the workings of a solution and an alternative which avoids some of the pitfalls of the current approach. I hope this discussion has shed some new light and reinforced some current understandings, and inshallah we aim that we can go into more in-depth discussion of some of these topics so that we can have a well-rounded, balanced and plausible understanding of this topic, and we can live our lives in a much more fruitful and effective way, inshallah. Wa akhir da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.